Definitely. We're definitely getting somewhere. And, the interesting thing too is I think, and maybe this is for a lot of South Asian people, where I know my mom would probably talk to her other patients about it, like other kids who are going through this. But when it comes to your own family, yes, of course, conflict of interest, but more than that, I think this is something that's kind of like an issue with a lot of cultures, and especially South Asian people, where it's like, well, not in my family, right? Or kind of things get brushed under the rug, but it would be looked at differently if it was, it's like, oh, I can accept that someone's going to therapy, someone's taking medication, but just not in my family, like what did we do wrong? And I think that's ultimately
Oh
a
man.
disservice.
Well, that's better than what it was, right?
That's
Before it
true.
was like
That's true.
absolutely, if you see
Right.
it's in another family, it's still shame. But I love how you
That's
phrase that
true.
now, where it's like, as long as it's not mine, which I get you. So the first question I had here was, being South Asian growing up, were there any impacts to your mental health from these experiences? Now, what I mean by that is mostly, did you ever feel like ostracized, or even home culture, things like that?
Yeah, it's really interesting because so when I tell people, especially now that I'm in California, right, that I tell them I grew up in New York City. I grew up in Staten Island, which is although it's getting more diverse now, it still felt like a small town. And I think this happens everywhere where people kind of congregate, especially growing up, right, with your own race, or, there are, when you think about middle school, there's a lot of emotions, a lot of bullying that happens. And for me, it was hard. Like I remember, there are a couple of instances that stick out in my mind. Like I remember I joined a dance class when I was 5. So, it was also kind of interesting because my parents weren't, like, I guess, quote unquote, typical Indian parents, because yes, they both were in the medical field. They both were doctors. But I remember, like, our family friends, like we had a very solid Indian family friend unit, but my parents had lots of friends of different cultures too, just because of work, like colleagues and things like that. So it was, the exposure was a bit different, for them. I mean, not to say that's good or bad, but I guess what I mean is it's not like I was exposed to a lot of different cultures growing up, a lot of different people, a lot of different viewpoints. So at home, the hard part about that was I also felt very different from other Indian people too. So it's like I felt both ways. I felt kind of different. So I mean, one of the things that I was going to tell you is I remember in like elementary school, I joined a dance class, and I'm usually, or at least back then, I was usually the only Indian person doing most, like whether it's extracurriculars, things like that, because I didn't really want to go to Indian dance class, right? Like my parents offered me all these things, and now looking back, I'm like, man, I wish I learned that. I think there was a part of me that was like trying to just deny that aspect of my culture, not realizing that's why I didn't want to do it back then. But so I joined this like tap and that jazz class, and I remember we had to do some dance where we had to hold the girl next to us their hand, and we had to like kick or something. And one girl didn't want to hold my hand because she said it was dirty, and it's because I'm brown. So I quit dance class, and that I think I was 5 or 6. And I actually, before I quit, I told my teacher, and that was a mistake. And this stuff happened to me a lot, where I would tell and then it would just backfire. Like the teachers couldn't handle it. And I think that's changing now too, in terms of conversation, because she was very much like, did you say that to her? And then of course the girl's like, no. And then I'm like, this is not going to go anywhere. And then, so things like that happened to me a lot. I was bullied a lot growing up. Not to say, yeah, like definitely got better, but there were defining moments in my childhood, like when you're 5 or 6, where you don't realize that people see you a certain way. And then to have that reality check at such a young age, I think that definitely interfered with like how much I put myself out there, how many extracurriculars I did. I think it kind of became a lot of hiding, because I didn't, of course, I mean, it's about survival too. You don't want to get bullied. You don't want people to say negative things about you. So I remember especially from then on to middle school, I definitely changed a lot, where I just became a lot more quiet, a lot more insecure, very anxious about anything, socially, because I was sort of expecting, I was expecting the worst. I was expecting people to say something, and because it had happened,
But
say
it's
something and
almost
then
like
yeah.
it's almost like you kind of feel like you're already going to get ostracized or excluded anyway. So it's like, why try? It's almost like you said.
Right.
If you want to hear more stories, don't forget to subscribe, comment, and like. To support more youth by youth led projects, visit us at youthspeak.ca, where you can donate and spread youth mental health awareness.
YouthSpeak Performance Charity. Speak, inspire, change.